Hi, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well. I'm sure you've read the title. It's this camera that we're gonna talk about today. This is officially now the video for which I've shot most photos for, because I started off with two rolls of C41 film stocks, Portra 400 and Fuji Pro 400H, and because it was taking a bit longer than I thought to sit down to make this video, I also managed to put a roll of slide film, Ektachrome, and a roll of black and white, my favorite Ilford HP5 Plus, through the camera. It ended up being a good thing because it made my decision on whether to keep the camera or return it much more informed than it would have been otherwise. I did want it to get a good handle on its usability, especially it being a rangefinder style camera, something that I wasn't used to, its metering, image quality, and also how reliable as a camera it is. So let's get to it. I'm a fan of the design. Actually, scratch that. I love the design. Just to be clear, it is a fully automatic medium format rangefinder camera with zoom lens. There are multiple modes this camera allows you to shoot with, even a manual mode if you're adamant in using it. It will be fiddly though, but if you're on one of the other modes, it's definitely a breeze. It's got a program mode and aperture priority mode, aperture slow mode, which is just like the aperture priority mode but will allow you to shoot on slower shutter speed with flash on. The autofocus works really well. I've not had an instance where the camera failed on me yet. It offers both infrared and phase detection autofocusing system to make it more reliable. The dials and switches are well placed. It even has a lens cap sensor to warn you if you're shooting with the cap on, as that's a common mistake with rangefinder style cameras that people make. It is so unbelievably lightweight that there's no problem in wanting to pick it up on my way out, so there's no lack of motivation there. The zoom lens packs away nicely, so you can drop it in your jacket pocket if you so desire. There is a flash, which I have not used yet. It's maybe one for the long-term review, but it's there, it's easy to use. Pops open with a button and it, you can just push it back. There's also a self-timer button available that, has a standard 10-second timer. I'm not gonna lie, coming from SLR and previously mirrorless cameras, it is a bit of a learning curve to get used to the rangefinder style. You won't know what's in focus and you only know the frame lines and the settings. The viewfinder is big and bright, which is definitely helpful, and it's parallax corrected. It is good that the autofocus seems pretty reliable. It does show you when your shot is not in focus and when it's over or underexposed. Speaking of exposure, there is an exposure compensation button and it's available in half a stop increments from -3 to +3 stops. When you zoom in, your viewfinder changes the scene to show you the appropriate focal length, which is again great, especially because it's a rangefinder camera. One quirk you'll notice right away is that when you're holding the camera in landscape orientation, which is how most of us hold it, the image crop will be vertical, portrait orientation, and vice versa. But it'll be fairly easy to get used to because you can see how the shots are being framed, and so you'll know to rotate the camera to get the landscape orientation shot, if that makes sense. This specific model, which is the last of the GA645 generation of cameras, had its shutter button positioning redesigned to make it comfortable to use in both landscape and portrait orientations. I haven't used the older models to compare if this is better than those models, but from my usage, it seems to be well positioned. In addition to all of this, there are other small thought out features like the LCD screen with a light so you can see the settings at night. Data is printed onto your film along the film borders. There's also a PC sync socket for external lights. So one of the appeals of it being a sort of a lightweight, fully automatic medium format camera is the fact that it has inbuilt metering. And if it's not good, then the whole experience of using this camera might not be as fun. It uses a center weighted mechanism, which is not as versatile as matrix metering, but I've not had a terribly metered image so far, which is a good sign. One thing to note though, it's not through the lens TTL metering, so if you end up using ND filter, you will have to compensate for it. I know that it's only been 4 rolls worth of experience with this camera and its metering, and I'm fully aware that I'll need to use it in a lot more variety of lighting conditions to have a better formed opinion, but for first impressions, I'm definitely impressed. The features in this camera are great, metering works really well, but if the image quality isn't good, then all of that is kind of a waste. I was also concerned by the fact that it is a zoom lens and how that would affect the image quality, but I gotta say that the concerns were well addressed after I saw the results. I'm gonna show some of the slides. I'm gonna use one of these loops that I normally use to check sharpness of the film. But I'm going to show it like this because then you know that I didn't add sharpness in Lightroom or Photoshop. It's literally what we can see in the film. In terms of what this can do, metering, image quality, autofocusing, and all these other functionalities, those functionalities seem pretty reliable in my usage so far. But as a reliable camera for longer term, I'm going to have to use it a bit longer to comment on that. One thing that concerns me, and this is not a new concern, I'm not surprised by this, I knew this while I was buying the camera, is the fact that it's a fully electronic camera. So in a way, it's a ticking time bomb, because what I've read is that the LCD screen here is usually the first to go, and once that goes, the camera soon follows. The reason why the LCD screen is the first to go is because the connection from the LCD screen, it goes through the back door and through this hinge then to the camera, which means that when you open the door, which you will do invariably every time you put in a new film and take it out, if you are gentle with it, like not let the door slam all the way over, and be a bit more careful while you open and close, then you're protecting that sort of connection that goes through the hinge. That's basically the weak point from what I hear. I mean, look, it's a 20-year-old camera to begin with, so there's nothing really we can do that's going to prevent it from dying. But what I mean is that it's a good amount of investment. So, keep the bit about electronics in mind before you invest in this camera. Yeah, definitely check with the seller that the screen is in full working order, ask for photos and that kind of stuff. If it is in good working order, then that is definitely a good sign. Fastest shutter speed on this camera is 700th of a second, which is okay if you're shooting ISO 400 or slower film stocks. But if you're shooting ISO 800 and above, and if you're shooting it in a bright day, if you don't have access to an ND filter, it might be a bit tricky. And another thing is that the lens, as good as it is, the apertures on all the focal lengths are pretty slow. Like on the widest focal length 55 mil, the f-stop available is 4.5. Like that's the fastest f-stop available. And when you're on the telephoto end of it, like 90 mil, the fastest available f-stop is 6.9, which is a bit laughable if I'm being honest. But the image quality is great, and I guess you don't need faster than f4.5, but it would have been nice if on the telephoto end you could still shoot with f4.5. I guess Fujifilm hadn't mastered that technology at the time. But anyway, another thing is that the manual mode here is extremely fiddly. This is the only dial you have to change the aperture, shutter speed, and the focusing distance. So it's going to be very fiddly. The other thing is that after you take a shot, the film advances. The sound that this camera makes is extrememely annoying. When you're finished shooting a roll, the final kind of film advancing sound all the way through is extremely annoying. Having said all that, I think these limitations, in my opinion, are a small price to pay for the kind of image quality and the usability that this provides, because it's a medium format camera that I can pick up and leave, and you know, it takes really good photos, and autofocusing and metering are reliable, which is saying something for a 20-year-old camera. So yeah, that's it. That's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for giving me your time. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.